Hey, greetings, everyone. This is your host and executive director for the American Institute of Stress. It's Will Heckman. Thanks again for joining us today. I'd like to ask if you are listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, make sure you go to stress.org and subscribe to our magazines. Check out all the information we have about stress and stress related issues. And if, like I said, if you are watching us, I'm going to ask you, please take a moment, hit the subscribe button. It really helps our channel. Also, I wanted to remind everyone that today's podcast is sponsored by AlphaStem. If you're struggling with anxiety, insomnia, or pain, and you need to take a look at AlphaStem, it's the FDA-cleared non-drug medical device trusted by healthcare professionals worldwide. AlphaStem proven patent technology uses a gentle microcurrent to help you feel better and feel better fast, and without the lasting side effects of medication. It's easy to use, it's portable, backed by extensive clinical research. AlphaStem fits right into your daily routine. I've used it myself. So make sure you visit alphastem.com to learn more and take charge of your life. All right, today we're going to try and learn how to stress less or have less stress and live more. So sort of the theme of this podcast. We talk about letting go of the pressure we all feel and making more room for joy and balance and peace of mind. I know life comes at us fast. Work, family, all kinds of responsibilities. It can pile up quick, but stress doesn't have to run the show. We all need a reset from time to time, a reminder to slow down, breathe, and focus on what really matters. So get comfy, relax. Let's dive into how we can all stress a little less today and live a whole lot more. All right. I have asked a friend of mine to join us today. He's called the Less Stressed Doc himself, Dr. Gary Sprouse. Dr. Sprouse is a retired primary care physician who practiced in Maryland for 38 years. And he graduated from George Washington University at the top 10% of his class. And he's also a fellow member of Mensa. He is committed to helping people improve their mental health, and he has taken everything he has learned about stress reduction and crafted his award-winning book, Highway to Your Happy Place. It's a roadmap to less stress. We'll talk about that a little bit. Dr. Sprouse has a unique perspective on stress that no one else is talking about. He's uncovered a groundbreaking new way to define where the majority of human stress originates. This new insight and the tools he developed to deal with stress are changing lives. And so I will give you a link to learn more about Dr. Gary Sprouse, but please join me in welcoming my friend, Dr. Gary Sprouse. Gary,
thanks for so much for having me here. This is great. I always like the opportunity to get to an audience to help them have less stress and have a better life.
And you know what? I appreciate you taking time out. I know you're busy doing your book tour. Congratulations on the award, by the way.
Yeah,
that's
thank you.
Awesome. You talk about the stress, but I wanted to ask you about how that happened. You worked as a physician in Maryland for 38 years, but what inspired you to dedicate, your life to a career helping people in stress?
Well, so as a primary care doctor, one of the advantages of being a primary care doctor is you get to develop very intimate relationships with your patients. It's the part that I like the most because you got to see people over and over and over again. And what I would see people for their hypertension and diabetes, they would tell me about their lives and the stresses that were in their lives. And what I realized was their stresses are having physiological effects. So it's causing their high blood pressure to be higher. It's causing their diabetes to be worse. It's causing them to eat more, sleep less, right? All these other things. And so I started looking into where the stresses come from and, what kind of stress. And so as I was reading books on stress, most of the books that are written on stress are saying, well, here's the top 100 stresses. There's like losing your spouse and losing your job and losing your health and things like that. And then they'd give you a sort of generic prescription and say, okay, well, do yoga or exercise more or don't worry about the future or go to church or whatever, right? And I'm like, well, and those are okay and they all work, but they're pretty generic. And I'm like, man, we need something, there's something missing. They're like, because there's literally thousands of books on this. And why is everybody still getting more stressed out than less? And so as a prescribing physician, I'm used to writing a prescription for someone, say, hey, here's a medicine for your diabetes. And it works great, but it might have some side effects. And we'll try to minimize the side effects and maximize the benefits, right? So when I use that idea and I applied that to humans and our stresses and our skills, that was the realization. That's the groundbreaking idea, that the majority of human stresses are really side effects to our skills. So I use our ability to envision the future as an example. So we can envision the future. So next week or next year, or when I retire, or when I get close to death, whatever, right? We can talk about all these things. The side effect is that you then have to worry about it.
And you saw this for 38 years, people coming to visit you thinking something was wrong, and really there was a cause. The basic cause of it was unmanaged stress.
Well, I mean, they had things that were wrong by that time. There were things that were physiologically wrong, but one of the main components to causing it was the stress, right? Because I've seen people when they retire and all of a sudden their blood pressure goes back to normal, and you're like, wait, what happened there, right? So it's like, yeah, so it makes a difference. But going back to the stress, so like my 1-year-old grandson doesn't envision the future because he doesn't have that skill yet. It hasn't developed yet. So when he's sitting at the breakfast table eating his banana, he doesn't go, Dad, how are we going to pay for college? Right? Because he doesn't have that skill. So he doesn't have the side effect. So he's in effect doing what psychologists tell us to do, which is he's living for today, which is great, but not very successful because he needs his parents to keep an eye on him to make sure that he doesn't get into trouble. Right. So the goal of my book, at least the original intention, was to say, hey, here's our skills. Here's the side effects. How do we keep the skills and lose the side effect?
So you spoke about your grandson and seeing that, but for you, was there a defining moment when you decided that you were going to go from, a general practitioner to an author? And then led you to, that's a big
I get
deal. It. Yeah, not everyone can write a book. Yeah. Even if they're very knowledgeable, not everyone can write a book, and you wrote an award-winning book.
Yeah.
What led you to do that?
So the project started like 25 years ago. Like the insights were from 25 years ago. And over the next 25 years, I was focusing on the ideas and honing the ideas, reading other books, getting other ideas, and kind of gelling them all together. And I originally tried to get it published, 25 years ago, and it didn't go so well. And now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, I wasn't anywhere near ready, right? So over the next 25 years, the practice took primary position, right? And the book was sort of in the background. But about 3 or 4 years ago, I went to a Tony Robbins conference. I've never been to Tony Robbins, but he's an impressive guy, right?
I've seen some.
Yeah. And one of the things that he said is, what are you not doing that you think you should be doing? And what are you telling yourself, right? And what are you going to tell yourself 5 years from now when you haven't done it yet? And I'm like, and I'm with my wife, and I'm like, tears are coming down my face. I'm like, oh my God, all right. I've been telling my patient for 25 years that I'm writing this book. And 5 years from now, it's not done, then I'm going to have to say, I've lied to you for 30 years. So I was like, you know what? So it was at that moment that I was like, okay, it needs to shift from background to foreground. And then writing the book became the primary process, and being a doctor kind of fit into that. But what I realized was that writing a book and being an author is kind of the same as being a doctor, right? I mean, so as a doctor, I'm helping people have healthier lives with a stethoscope and a prescription pad. As an author, I'm doing the same thing, but with a book, right?
Yeah, and a lot more.
Writing the book itself, the original draft was pretty easy because I had spent 25 years thinking about what I was going to write. The actual process of getting a book published, that's a little crazy, right? There's a lot of moving pieces that have to come together to get something that comes out. And yeah, my whole goal as a doctor, my goal has always been to take this massive medical information, digest it, and put it out in a format that you, my patient, can understand it for wherever level you're at, right? And so I'm taking all this massive information and individualizing it to you and putting it in a way that you can understand it. So the book was that same idea. Like I'm taking a whole bunch of information, but I want to condense it and put it in a place where you can understand it, because it doesn't do any good if I'm writing a book and you don't understand what I'm saying. So
You know what? And your book is very well written. I have to tell you that.
thank you.
And you're right. I have read many books, certainly about stress and other things, and some of it, to be honest with you, was hard to follow.
Yeah.
It's my limitations, obviously, but yeah, not everyone can write. Good job.
Yeah, well, thank you. And no, you're right. Well, so then, and here's the key, right? So at the time when I started this process, people read books, right? But by the time I finished the process, reading books wasn't nearly as big a thing, right? So then I've had to put this ideas in other formats. So there's an audiobook that just came out. I got an online course that's coming out soon.
Right.
I'm going to be doing a 5-minute radio segment. There's going to be, right? So there's blogs and there's all these other ways that people consume their information. And so, yeah, so that's been a new challenge, right? So my new thing that I want to do is do a TED Talk. So I just met this guy who's done 4 TED Talks, and I'm like, no, come on, what did you do to get 4 TED Talks? So he gave me a secret sauce. So I'm like, yeah, all right, we're gonna go.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that, and I'm hoping we convince you to do a webinar for us. So
yes, that would be awesome.
If you're listening to this, look for that coming up in the near future. All right, we talked a little bit about what physiologically what chronic stress can do to you. High blood pressure, gut problems. The list is long. But what misconceptions do people often have about stress that you can clear up for them? And I hear them all the time, but you're the doctor.
Yeah. Well, here's the first thing, and I just coined this term the other day. I call it stress blindness. And what that means is people get habituated, they get used to the certain level of stress, right, and they don't even see that it's there. So they don't even think it's stressful. And I think doctors are probably the most stress blind, right? Because they're so busy. Literally every decision is a life and death decision. Every decision could be $1 million malpractice suit. Literally, and you're making hundreds of decisions a day. So you can't pay attention to all that. So you just kind of put it off into the background. And so when you retire, then you're like, oh my God, that was a lot, right? So I think there are people who have this incredible level of stress and they don't even recognize that it's there until it's not. And so I think being willing to sit back and go, wait, what stress am I having? So I use myself as an example. When I was training, I would drive to Washington, D.C., and I would go through traffic, right? So it'd be 15 minutes to go there when it was nighttime. But during the day, during traffic, it was an hour. And if there was something wrong, there'd be 2 hours. And you don't even realize it, but your heart's a little tense. You're this, your blood pressure's up. And it's like, so I didn't realize it till I started living where I am now, which is a more rural area. When I go back into the city now, even there's just a little bit of traffic, I'm like, right? So you don't realize how much stresses people have because they don't really identify because they've gotten used to, like, that's just my normal life. And you're like, right, no, it doesn't have to be like that.
I agree with you 100%. And AIS, we have stress assessments. You can go on and take a stress assessment and really understand what your stress triggers are. Like you say, you get so used to it.
Yes, exactly.
You forget, you
don't even know that it's there.
I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn, and half my life ago moved to a much slower paced place, and did not ever realize how just living there made you tense and stressed and all that. So you're right. And you said something, you explained a concept of stress awareness. But how do we explain that to people who just feel overwhelmed? How do you get them to even slow down and reflect? Just saying, hey,
Well,
If
I'll
you
be
don't, you're
honest with
gonna
you, man.
die. Like,
That's been the struggle, right? Like every single person that I talk to and say, "Hey, I'm writing this book on how to have less stress," and they go, "Oh, literally every single person, I need that book." And you're like, "Okay," but then you give them the book, and then to see them a couple months later, and you're like, "Whoa, so what you think of the book?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know, I haven't had a chance to read it yet." And you're like, "Wait, you told me you're having too much stress, and like then you're not doing anything to make it better, right?" So yeah, it's hard, and I think part of the problem is that people don't think there's a solution. They go, I got all, you're like, I'm worried about my job, I'm worried about my kids, I'm worried about my spouse, blah, 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 I'm worried about my parents. Like they got all these things and they go, there's no way to do less of this. This is just life. And I'm like, and I think you said this is like, life is coming at you, but how you act, how you respond to it is really where your stresses come from. And this is the
yes,
point of my book. Like, you can envision the future, then you worry about it. Well, people can. I mean, I have patients that come to me, Dr. Sprouse, I worry that I worry too much, and you're like, well, then you probably do, right? And it's like,
right.
so like it's these things. Like I feel guilty that I did it, or I regret that I did that, or I'm bored, or I'm like my self esteem is crappy, or I'm like, or I'm overwhelmed. And you're like, but if they don't think there's something they can do about it, well, then they're just going to go on with their life and do the best they can. And I'm like, no, there's answers out there. There's ways to have less stress. And that's one of the reasons, that's what motivates me to get out here to help people and go, look, hey, I'm here to help you. You don't have to live like that. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a way to get out of this. There's a way to have less of it.
It's why I love having people like you on the show, because there are listeners out there who are so overwhelmed by stress they're frozen.
Yes, yes,
They're
absolutely.
afraid to do
Yes.
anything. And I have spoken to people when they find out, oh, what do you do? And I tell them, and go, oh boy, do I need you. First of all, you don't need me. You need Dr. Gary Sprouse.
Yeah, there you
You don't
go.
need me. I'm the guy who pushes buttons and helps run the AIS. Go to stress.org and find out some things. The one thing you should never do is nothing,
Yeah.
because then you're just simply, what did Einstein say? Or Freud
You're
say that
frozen.
the definition of insanity is keep doing the
Oh,
same thing
yeah.
over and over and expecting a different
Well,
result.
but here's
You
what I'll
know,
tell you, right? Here's the analogy that I use for people that are overwhelmed is that you're in this cave and it's black, it's pitch black. You can't see anything. So you go, oh, I got to get out of it. This is miserable. It's cold. I don't like it. And you stand up and you hit your head on the ceiling. You're like, ah. And you're like, so then you reach your hand out and you touch some slimy thing and you're sitting in a pond and you're like, this is miserable. I hate this, but I don't see any way out. That's what I see people when they're
right.
overwhelmed. And you're like, and again, they don't see that light at the end. They don't see the light that say, hey, here's the end, here's the exit. They don't see that and they're miserable, but they literally don't think there's a way out. And so that's where you have to do something to get out of it. And the point is, what is it that you do? And when they're stressed out like that, they don't have much attention span. They don't have much money. They don't have much energy. They don't, right? So doing anything, reading a book, listening to a blog, watching your podcast, it becomes overwhelming. It adds to the overwhelmingness. And so they're like, ugh, right? So then they just sit in their dark cave, miserable.
That's a good point. I think you hit the nail on the head. So if Dr. Gary Sprouse hands you his book, he's not adding to your stress. It's a tool to use to alleviate some stress. If you go to stress.org and you look up, it's not a homework assignment.
Right.
You have to stop looking at it that way. It's not adding to, I'm so overwhelmed with things to do, I don't need another thing to do. Well, the fact that you are overwhelmed is the reason you need to read that book or go
Yeah.
to our site and find some way to help alleviate that, to help manage your stress. And you talk about living more, which I thought was a great turn of phrase. What does that practice look like for someone? How do they balance work, family, and personal responsibilities? Give us a go-to thing, that the first thing they should do.
So let's continue with the overwhelmed part, right?
Okay.
So what I find is when people get overwhelmed, they think it's unfixable. And what I show them is, and I use this thing called an S curve, right? So think of an S. And what you see is that one, two, three problems, they're okay. But a fourth problem comes along and they go from feeling okay to being overwhelmed. So there's this very steep curve. So it doesn't, all it takes is one extra problem, bang, then they're overwhelmed. And then overwhelmed becomes a fifth problem. So now they got five problems. But I'm like, look, it's a very steep curve. So if we just get rid of one problem, we're going to get you back to where you're feeling in control. So it's not as bad as you think. It's not, I got to fix every single thing in my life to feel good. I just got to fix one thing and I'll be back under control, right? So that makes it more doable. That's number one, right? And number two is I give them this tool to use for when they're feeling overwhelmed. So the word I use is lumping. And I watch this over and over again. And I've caught myself doing it. I watch my wife do it. So lumping is, well, I got this problem and then this problem and then this problem and then this. Oh, yeah. And I forgot that problem. And they throw that on top. And now they got this massive problem. And they're like, I don't even know how to get started. I don't know what. I don't, right? So it gets overwhelming. So the antidote to lumping is compartmentalization. So what does that mean? That means, hey, I got this problem. My kid's this. Oh, I got this problem. At work, there's that. I got this problem. My spouse is this. Oh, I got it. Right. No one of those problems is overwhelming. It's only when you let them all congeal together that they get overwhelming. So the more separate you can keep them, the less overwhelmed you're going to be, right? And so
Makes
then,
sense.
so one of the things the picture I give people is a shoebox. And I go, if you walked into your bedroom and there was 100 shoeboxes and the bottom was here and the lid was there and the left was there and the right was there and you got hundreds of shoes all over the place, you'd be overwhelmed. But if you walked into that same room, same amount of shoeboxes, but now the bottom's here, the shoes are inside, the lid's on top, they're put up to a closet, so they're up. Same shoeboxes, but now it's not overwhelming. Now you just take one shoebox down, you look at it, you put it back up. Take the next shoebox down, like put it back up. That's not overwhelming. And now that gives you more energy to solve the problems that you got. So you can get rid of some of these problems that you don't have.
A lot of
Prioritizing, making lists, writing things down, all that helps get rid of some of these problems, and then you're not overwhelmed.
I was going to say a lot of people recommend um, making lists, staying organized, things like that. And everybody's different. Everybody perceives stress differently, handles stress differently, but there are some generalities that
Oh, absolutely.
if you are confused and discombobulated, it doesn't help. And many people have come on the show and said that when they started getting organized and just took control of their life and do what Dr. Gary Sprouse says, and departmentalize things, don't lump, or I used to call it chunking.
Yeah, there you go. Same idea.
You are better off. Just do you think gender plays a role in that? The men and
Well,
women
yes.
look
So
at that particular thing differently.
yes. So I think that, and this is from reading and physiological and looking at humans as an animal, right? So men are bigger, stronger in general than women, not always, but in general. And they were set up to hunt and go out and protect and that kind of stuff, right? Women were designed, they're a little bit smaller and they were designed to take care of kids, okay? And that's in general, right? So what you see then is in men, if you're going to go out there to hunt a woolly mammoth, you can't think all the bad things that are going to go wrong, or you wouldn't go do it. So men are set up to minimize. So when they're stressed out, they tend to minimize. They're like, it's not going to happen. No, I'm going to take down the woolly mammoth. No big deal. Like, it's not that big, right? Right. Women, on the other hand, were designed to take care of kids. So their focus is on making sure their kid survives. So what they're doing is looking into the environment to see what could go wrong. So then they, in quotes, worry that, I got to make sure that snake doesn't get to my kid or he doesn't eat a rock or whatever, right? So so now modern day where we're not killing woolly mammoths anymore, it's like, what you see is men minimize. So they go, oh, honey, it's going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen. And the wife is like, oh, I was worried that was going to happen. but you're reassuring, so that's great. And they get together because it's like, oh, I'm going to help you because I feel good now that I help you feel better, and you may be reassured. But then here's what happens: like the guy's wrong, and something did happen. So then the wife goes, "Wait, the last time you said that it did happen, and then I was," and so now when when the guy's trying to be reassuring, it not only isn't reassuring anymore because she goes, "Well, the last time you said that, it did happen." So now it's not only reassuring, but now she's like, "Well, why the hell do I have to do all the worrying? And you just sit around not thinking about it at all." Like, so then they start building up resentment, and then they're like, so he's trying to be reassuring more and more, and she's like, "That's not working," and he doesn't know what else to do, and so then they end up with the same. They're doing the same things, except now they're fighting with each other.
Right.
So there is I think there's a big difference. Now I've seen couples where it's reversed, where the wife is the minimizer and the husband's the person who's worried. So it can go both ways, but more commonly it's women. The other difference that I see in women is when they're stressed out, they tend to share their stresses. So they talk to other people and go, "Oh, this and I got that and this and that," and which is fine. But what happens is when they're sharing, they take on the stresses as if it's theirs. So here's the analogy I use: is a sponge, right? So think of a woman as a sponge, and they're sucking in everybody's stresses. Like, oh, I hear about this, and I hear about, and my aunt's this, and my uncle's that, and my next door neighbor's this, and my friend's that, and they're sucking in all the stress. But what happens is they get saturated, and then they start leaking. So now the water's leaking out of their sponge because they just can't handle it anymore. And yet their friend comes and says, "Oh my God, my husband," and they're like, "Okay," and they're listening more, and you're like, but you can't even handle what you got. You're already leaking, right? So one of the advices that I give to people is say, hey, your stresses are a 10. Everybody else's stresses max out at 5. They're there. You're not ignoring them, not 0, but they're a 5. And you will cut your stress in half just by doing that. So I had to learn that as a doctor, right? As a doctor, literally everybody's coming in with their own stresses, their blood pressure, their high blood, their family member, they have cancer or whatever. If I took on everybody's stresses as a 10, yeah, I wouldn't make it through the day. So I had to learn early on, hey, your stress is a 5, and I'm going to do everything I can to help you, but your stress is a 5. My stresses, they're a 10, right? So just by doing that, you reduce your stress significantly.
I was going to ask you about that, your own relationship with stress. Being a doctor, a general practitioner, and having a practice is so stressful.
Mm-hmm.
That doctors are actually leaving the field more so than they ever have before. And we've done shows on that, especially young women. But I was going to ask you about your own relationship with stress, because no one comes to visit you just to say hi. I got a problem. I'm coming to see you. Nobody says, hey, Gary, brought you some chocolate.
Yeah, no, well, I always thought I would get in trouble for this because I kind of blur the line between physician and friend.
Right.
And I'm like, I always felt like I had 3,000 friends that would come to see me and we would talk about stuff, right? Because trust me, as a doctor, there were things that I had gone on in my life that I would share with them. And I felt like by me sharing with them my stuff, that they were more willing to share their stuff with me. So I always wanted to do in my office at a coffee shop or something, say, hey, let's have a donut and a coffee and let's talk, right? So
right.
So part of how I got through my stress was I thought of these people not as patients, but as friends who I was giving my advice to, and that made a big difference.
It's funny because my doctor for almost 20 years became a friend of mine.
Yeah,
and when I was an athlete, he actually showed up once and came to a tournament, and I would go to see him and say, do you think I need? He goes, let me tell you something. I've watched you play sports. If that was a problem, you would have been dead already. So Lenny was a great guy, and I do. You get to know somebody. I mean, share things with him I'm not sharing with anyone else. And I knew about his kids and things like that. So yes, you're right. But you're also right that negative stress can be very contagious. So when you see one
So
person,
one of my answers to how I got through was I saw people as friends, not just as
right,
patients that were needy. I didn't see them as needy patients. Two is that I learned early on that I'm not fixing people. That my job was not to fix people. My job was to give them the advice to have them make a better life. If
right,
they chose to use the advice, great. If they chose not to use the advice, all right, then I got to either find different advice or find a way for them to do it, or that's just the way it's going to be, right? So, like somebody would come and say, my shoulder hurts when I do this. And you go, well, stop doing
right,
that. And they keep doing it. And you're like, all right, well, maybe I got to find a better way to convince them or find some other way they can do that without doing it, right? So, but it took the burden of trying to fix people off because that
right.
gets overwhelming. The third thing
I,
was that when I look at burnout, basically burnout happens for one main reason, which is you have high goals, like what you have high expectations, what you want to get accomplished is really high. The system isn't letting you do it. So you get incredibly frustrated because you can't do what you think you should be doing. And so then you get burnt out because you're like, oh, this is so frustrating. I can't do what I want to get done. And so then people quit because they're like, I don't want to feel like that. Like I had one of my patients was a teacher of the year for the county, right? She was great. And the principal would give her difficult kids because she was so good.
right,
But what happened was her class became all difficult kids. And she had the same expectation that she was going to achieve the same goals that she had when she had kids that weren't difficult, now with difficult kids. And she was frustrated. And so she quit. I'm like, no, don't quit. You're really good at what you do. We just need to change your expectations or we got to change your classroom. But it's like, don't quit.
right.
You're really good at what you do, right? So burnout is real. And so one of the things that I had to learn was like, so one of the things that I would get frustrated is like I'd want to get a test done and the insurance would say no. And I'm like, ugh, right? But what I realized was, and I wrote this down, when I saw a patient had cancer and I couldn't fix that, well, what did I do? Well, I, worked with the patient. We did empathy. We did this. We did that. We gave them hope. We talked about the possibilities, blah, blah. I'm like, well, why is that any different than dealing with someone who I can't get a test on? It's the same frustration. Like I got something I want to get done. I can't get it done. So when I started putting it in those terms, I'm like, okay, well, my job then is to do the best I can to get the test done. But I'm going to have to deal with a certain amount of it's not going to happen because the insurance company won't let it happen. When you step back and let that go, well, then you don't get so burnt out because you're like, okay, that's just a part of the job now.
Uh, we're running long on time, but I wanted
Oh.
to ask you something that's because you're up in the world of stress management as much as I am. Do you see some things changing? I know the perception in a lot of institutions are changing. The thought process of mental health in general is changing. But do you see any new research or discoveries about stress that excite you that you see coming up?
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's out there, right? And the problem when there's a lot of stuff means that none of them works that great.
Right.
And that's so to me, the biggest problem is that we keep thinking of stress in this and not sure, like we talk about stress as like, your spouse dies and you're like, okay, so what do you do about that? Well, you have to understand that the stress of your spouse dying, what makes that so stressful? That's the key, right? And I don't know if the research is going in that direction because what I'm doing, and I think that's why I think what I'm doing is so important and it's so different, is because when I go, these are side effects to our skills, right? So when you look at it that way, then you're like, okay, so what makes losing your spouse so bad? Well, because now you worry. Well, what's worry? Well, it's a side effect of being able to envision the future. Okay, well, futures aren't real. We just make that up, but it seems real, right? Well,
Yeah.
why you feel guilty? Why do you feel guilty? Well, I think I did something wrong. Or what did you do? Well, so now you examine what wrong is you had to decide somewhere you had the skill to decide what's right and wrong, right? Third, you feel regret. And you're like, what do you mean regret? Oh, well, I made a bad choice. Well, where choice come from? Choice is a human skill. Like the fact that you have choice is amazing. The fact that you regret the choice, right? You're bored, you're low self-esteem, you're overwhelmed. Like these are all things. So I can't bring your spouse back. but I can change your worry. I can change your guilt. I can change your regret. So when you look at what causes that to be so stressful, it's these things. Okay, those I can do something about. These are the ingredients that lead to something being stressful. That makes the difference. That's why I think what I'm doing is so important. And I don't really see anybody doing that. What I do see are people going, oh, use, electromagnetic things, or use, different kind of talk therapy, or do exercise, or do yoga, or go live in a monastery for a while, right? I see all these generic concepts to reduce what we call stress, but they're not the ingredients that lead to it. And so what I'm doing is separating out what's causing the stress. And when you realize that it really is us, it's our skills. So the first thing you go, gratitude that I have the ability to envision the future, because my 1-year-old grandson can't, and my 85-year-old demented patient can't, right? So
Right.
great that I have that skill. How do I keep the skill and lose the side effect? And that's where the book comes in. But the second thing is people don't know where they want to go, because you were talking about people that are overwhelmed. And I would say to my patients, so if you had less stress, where would you be? And they look at me like, well, I don't know. I never got that far. I only envisioned having less stress, right? And I'm like, well, how are you going to get someplace if you don't know where it is you're trying to get to, right? And so I actually wrote the second half of the book first, which is how to have less stress. The first half of the book is where the heck are we trying to get to, right? And so that's when the happy place idea came along. I'm like, no, when you understand what a happy place is and where you're trying to get to, you're like, oh, I can get there. That's not that hard, right? And then if I get rid of the stresses that are keeping me from being in the happy place, life is great.
It's also motivating.
It's very motivating.
I want to be able to spend more time with my family. I want to be able to go fishing. I don't know, whatever that happy place is for you.
Well, I'm reading this book on Stoicism, right? Which is very misunderstood philosophy. I don't know how much you know about it, but
I know a little bit about it.
And I'm learning, right? But one of the things that I have in common with what they talk about is emotions. And so what I've learned is that humans are emotional creatures who can think. We're not thinking creatures who have emotions. We're emotions first, thinking second. And what I see is our emotions. And when I said this to somebody the other day, tell me what an emotion is. And they're like, it's, I don't know, it's like anger, it's fear. And I'm like, well, no, those are examples of emotions. Tell me what an emotion is. And he's like, well, I don't know, it's like a reaction. I'm like, yeah, okay, this is the problem, right? So when we don't understand stuff, or we have very superficial definitions, then it's hard to change them. So my definition of an emotion is it's a push button. So you just have to push the button, and it's pre-programmed. So it's already in there. So no one has to teach you how to get angry. What they have to teach you is what to get angry about. So like, I know how to get angry. I just don't know how to, why I'm getting angry, right? So when you see it's a pre-programmed push button neurohormonal response. So that means that your nerves are acting up and your hormones are acting up, and it's a pre-programmed thing, and it's getting you set up to do something. So anger is set up to make you fight. Fear is set up for you to make you run away or hide, right? Sadness is meant you did, right? So all these emotions that we have are set up to do a specific thing, and they were designed before we could think. So if I'm sitting there and I hear a rustle in the bush, I'm not thinking, oh, is that a cat or is that a lion? I'm just getting the hell out of there, right? So my body, like, instantaneously has been set up to run or hide. And then later on, I'm like, oh, yeah, it was just a cat. It's okay, right? So the problem that I see is that our emotions are now getting used for things that they weren't meant to be used for. So worry isn't a perfect example. So worry is, I'm looking into the future. I'm focused on all the bad things that can happen, and I'm having a fear reaction right now. So my fear reactor's gone off, and there's nothing out there. So the problem with that is anytime I think a lion's in the bush, I'm going to have a fear reaction, and there's nothing to make it stop. That's the problem. So now I'm like, fear, 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 fear. Fear wasn't meant to be there all day, every day. It was meant to be there a couple minutes and you got away or you got eaten. Either way, it was gone, right? Now we live with fear all the time. And it sets us up to get us into trouble. And the second problem is, and I was just writing about this, that a lot of people don't like that feeling of fear. So they transform it into anger.
Hmm.
So people are running around angry. And you're like, why are you angry? And I'm going to use the example of transgender, right? So for whatever reason, people are really mad at transgender people. They blame them for everything. And you're like, wait, they didn't do anything to you. What the heck? What? And then you realize, no, they're just afraid. And you're like, what are you afraid of? Oh, I'm afraid that it's contagious, or I'm afraid that it's a sign that our society is deteriorating, that people can't even figure out what sex they are. So it's really fear, but they've turned it into anger. Because, and here's why: anger is this incredible emotion that makes you feel very powerful and invincible, right? When you're angry, man, you're right. Like when
Right.
you watch football coaches, they want their players to be a certain level of angry, because then they're not hiding. Like fear tends to pull you back, anger pushes you out. So when you're angry, you're like, whoa, I'm going to take on the 300-pound lineman. I'm going to beat that guy down, right? So we want, like, being angry actually makes you feel good in a lot of ways. So people turn fear into anger because it makes them feel better, even though fear is really the problem, or they feel disrespected, or they got their feelings hurt or whatever, but they turn it into anger, and that's where we get into trouble. So the key then is, and this is what Stoicism is all about, is you need to control your emotions. Don't let your emotions control you. That's where people get into trouble. You need to control your emotions. And I was watching a TV show, it was a sitcom, and this lady went literally in 1 minute, went through 4 distinct emotions, didn't say a single word. And it was like, what control this lady had. She was angry, she was happy, she was sad, she was 4 different things all in 1 minute without any words. And I'm like, what? I'm like, we don't all need to be that good, but we can be better, right? And when you realize that you're the one that's controlling these reactions, then you can go, oh, well, now you're not being triggered by everything out in the world.
You know what? Those are really good points. And our goal is to be in more control of what we feel, how we perceive things, certainly how we manage the stress and how life comes at us. Maybe it's just a reframing of the way we
Yeah,
perceive things can
absolutely.
do so much for you. So, well, uh, we could talk about this. Like I said, I
Oh, we
hope
only I
we
only
do
got
our
like 3 more
webinar.
hours of material here.
I know that's why we're going to get you to do a webinar for us, so they don't have to hear me talk. I'm just the guy who's curious. The final thing I did want to ask you, because I get asked by people, what do you do, and what do you do personally to manage your stress?
Wow. So 2 things. First off, somebody asked me that question, and I started making a list. It's like 50 things, right? So it's like I
That's a
read,
good
I
point.
exercise, I watch TV, I play basketball, I do karaoke, I drink water. I like there's like a whole bunch of things. So the key is I have multiple things that I can pick depending on the circumstance. So you can't do a relaxation technique when you're driving, right? You can't like close your eyes and do hypnosis while you're driving, right? So I have multiple things that are at my disposal to figure out what I can do in any given circumstance. So no one thing gets me into trouble, because where I see people getting in trouble, they go, "Oh, I'm really stressed out. I'm going to drink alcohol." But then alcohol starts causing stress. So then they drink more, and then they drink more, and then they drink. And so, like, when you only pick one thing to reduce your stress, that gets you into trouble, and pretty
Right.
quickly sometimes. So I have multiple things that I do, and they're designed depending on what the circumstances are at the time. So if I'm at home relaxing, I can do relaxation technique. But if I'm like, I've had to be in court for something, and I'm like, dude, my body is like vibrating. I'm like, what? Then I've been in a cafeteria doing push-ups and sit-ups to give that energy somewhere to go so I can calm down and be ready for when I get in front of the judge, right? So it's like, yeah, so that I think there's multiple things that I do. But the other thing that I do, so these are the things that I do to reduce the stress that I have. But the other part of that is a mindset. And I got involved with the second book that's with Jack Canfield, and it's called Mindset Matters. And it's like 30 authors that have all written a chapter about how mindset made a difference. And mindset is dramatically makes the difference. You were talking about perceptions, and yes, mindset and perceptions change how you view what's coming at you. So my board did not like what I was doing with pain management, right? I'd never hurt anybody. In fact, they hurt my patients way more than I ever did, but they didn't like it because the pendulum had swung, blah, 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 right? And it's like, at first, like my mindset could have been, oh, the board is picking on me and it's not nice, and blah, 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 or I'm so freaked out, or I'm just going to quit, right? No, my mindset was like, I'm helping my patients, and I just got to convince them that I'm doing the right thing. And I wasn't able to, but because of what they were doing, it made me go, well, okay, my board could do something stupid to me. So I'm going to make sure I have enough money and enough resources that if the board does something stupid, I'm going to be okay. So what happened was I ended up taking a job at a nursing home that was like an hour and a half away. And I'm like, I would have never done that. But by doing that, I made a lot of money. It opened up 3 other nursing homes. It opened up some rental properties that I bought. It like made, and now I'm retired. I'm like, if they hadn't done what I did, I would have never made any of these decisions. Dude, thank you so much. Right? It's like, I wouldn't have said that at the time, but that's how mindset matters, right? That there's a story where a farmer, his son breaks his ankle, and he's all upset about it. But the next day, an army recruiter comes and said, hey, we need your son. He goes, oh, he's got a broken ankle. He goes, oh, well, he can't come to fight the war with us. And you're like, thank God he broke his ankle, right? So sometimes something that looked bad now, like later on, actually looks good. So how you perceive things, mindset matters. It makes a huge difference.
That's a great answer to that question. But there's not one thing you do.
Yes.
It depends on the situation. The best thing to do is to have a little toolbox of things to do.
Yes, there you go.
And when you need a certain tool, there are certain things you can do all the time. You can do some breathing techniques. You can do some relaxing techniques. But like the Dr. Sprouse said, sometimes it just depends on your situation. And one of the most important things is to train how you perceive things, your mindset. Yes. Gary, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to your doing a TED Talk.
Yeah.
And I certainly look forward to you doing a webinar for us. We appreciate, I know a lot of people benefited from a lot of the things you said. I'm going to put up a link for where they can go and get your book and find out more about Dr. Gary Sprouse. That's going to do it for us today. We're running out of time, but I really appreciate you bringing in awareness to all the issues we talked about today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm hoping that the people who are listening to this got something out of this.
I'm sure they did.
And that means you and I did our job. Yay.
Well, this has been your host, Will Heckman. I want to thank everybody who joined us today. Please don't forget to follow this podcast and subscribe. If you hung in this long, please subscribe. And I want to remind everyone, just as stress is different for each of us, there's no one stress reduction or management strategy that is right for everyone. So that means you need to join us next time as we explore some more stress management strategies and insights. Have a great day.